we are down, but we'll rise again under the able leadership he is providing and the future which is assured. Mr. Speaker, we are, by the practice of this House, ready to debate Mr. President's message. Considering the situation we find ourselves as a country, Mr. Speaker, we are ready to debate this message now. However, Mr. Speaker, as has been the practice, members would want to prepare. And I noticed that the minority leader was jotting down a lot of notes. I need to remind you that I have with me the 2014, 2013, and the 2016 State of the Nation Address. And all of these were full of lamentations. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what he was actually jotting down. But if it was a debate he was preparing for, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure him that we will face him with this optimism and remind him of the lamentations of 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016.
Mr. Speaker, the Hansard will record me today. Mr. Speaker, the unemployment situation in our country is at a critical point. Yet, we did not hear a word from our president on this matter. Mr. Speaker, out of 33 million population, only 11.3 million are employed. This number includes peasant farmers. Mr. Speaker, the difference between the 33 million and 11.3 million is what I call ninja. No income, no jobs, no assets. I am shocked to the marrow to have noticed that our president, following the recent ministerial reshuffle, has increased the size of his government. Mr. Speaker, today we have the Minister of Finance Domestic and the Minister of Finance International.
So we continue with our conversation on the SONA, but now we're going to cut incisively to the economics-related matters. Joining us for a conversation, we have Dr. Sharif Mahmood Khalid, Associate Professor in Accounting and Finance. He joins the conversation. We also have Dr. Prince Adjei, Labor Economist, University of Ghana. Both of them join the conversation this morning. I believe Dr. Adjei is joining us virtually. Dr. Adjei, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Great. It's good to have you. I just wanted to acknowledge your presence and see you and hear from you. Dr. Khalid, good morning to you as well. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start from the economics of the SONA, right? When you listen to the president, I'm supposing you've followed the entire thing.
I did.
What did you make of it?
Well, that's
from an economic perspective.
Well, from an economic perspective, that was really quite interesting because I thought that we're going to have, given that we've just had an IMF program, we're going to have more confidence reinjected into the economy because, as I said, whistles and bells, sounds, all of these play a role in economic terms. So, but it didn't really have much more when it comes to economic issues or real confidence because we went for the low-hanging fruits. For instance, the president was touting an achievement of having paid or repaid a bond, and that's the highest that has ever been paid in our country's history. I thought that why would that be an economic achievement for any president to tout as part of the State of the Nation's address? The fact that, or what I expected to say is that here we were as an economy, as part of the IMF program. These are the itemized issues that we've been investing in or will be investing in. These are the yields we'll be getting or these are the gains we'll be getting. We've just had a harrowing experience of a haircut, as we domestically call it. We've had pension bonds being attacked and all of that. So what are the real injections that we're putting? What are the modalities we're putting in place? I was thinking that this would be the real State of the Nation's address, but we seem to have missed that point.
So what would you say with all of these shots fired not hitting that target? Would you say the State of the Nation address as far as the economy was concerned? How would you describe it?
Well, I think that it was missing, it was absent, right? It was uninspiring, and it didn't inject confidence into the economy. Why do I say this? We already struggled to get an IMF tranche, and it missed all the indicators. If you look at the local economy, what happens is that when there's an IMF program, business or local business people would gauge when a tranche is coming in, right? By this, what it means is that once it hit the central bank's account, the city would probably tend to perform a little bit. Then those who want to go into forex trading and the likes of that jump in to make or take advantage of that. This time around, that didn't happen because the market was dysfunctional, because we missed that tranche, right? In the history of the country, never has it happened before have we cracked a sweat to actually get a cocoa syndicated loan. And all of these are indicators of the local economy that business watchers have, and even external investors do have. So having had all of this mix and match issues as far as the economy is concerned, which has not been normalized under an IMF program, the expectation was that the president would come in with some concrete steps to say, okay, well, this is the way forward, this is the roadmap I have, by injecting confidence. So if we miss it with the IMF program, why do we miss it with the State of the Nation's address? So the president has missed an opportunity in his last tenure, especially when a budget has been read. He's not going to witness any budget again before he leaves office, and he's actually missed an opportunity to re-inject the kind of...
But his administration will get to draft the budget for the coming year.
Yeah, they would, but what I say is he has missed that opportunity as a person, yeah.
Right. Let me go to Dr. Adjei. I'd like to find out from you. I don't know whether you are as pessimistic, so to speak, as
you feel it as well, so you should probably
Dr. Khalid sounds. What did you take from the president's delivery as far as the economy is concerned?
Well, good morning and thank you one more time. Well, I would not say I am overly pessimistic. I think that this is a state of the nation and not necessarily state of the economy. Right. So there were several issues that were tackled. But I think that as a labor economist, I would have wished to have heard a president speak on matters relating to unemployment, job creation, you know, given the fact that it has become a topical issue in recent times. Nonetheless, the president made some gains they have made with respect to the IMF program, payment of dividends to bondholders. He mentioned a few tax incentives that, you know, have been introduced in the creative arts sector. He also made some interesting remarks on some investment that have been made in the energy sector, you know, digitalization. These are allied issues that eventually has to do with the economy. So I wouldn't say it is overly pessimistic, but it is just that Ghanaians expected more from him, and we were hoping that he would speak to the bread and butter issues that the ordinary Ghanaian faces. So these are my initial comments for now.
Now, when you look at what Mr. President said about the economy, from power generation, keeping the lights on, to the myriad other issues he touched on, I just want to read for you some of the statements he made, take them apart. Did you find optimism? Did you find any real presence, purpose in them? And I'll get to those shortly. So I'll just take a look at some of them. I want to read verbatim rather than, you know, conjecture. Real GDP growth for the first 3 quarters of 2023 averaged 2.8%, and that was higher than the target of 1.5% for 2023. That would be an increment of 1.3%. He also talks about inflation, you know, peaking at 54.1%, plummeting to about 23.5%. He talks about the CD being largely stable since February 2023, with a cumulative depreciation of 9% between February and December 2023. He talks about gross international reserves being about $5.9 billion, accounting for about 2.7 months of import cover and all of that. But did that impress you when he got into the nitty-gritty of the economy and what we can expect in the coming months for the rest of the year?
Well, let me talk about real GDP growth averaging at 2.8%. Our focus must shift from merely being enticed with statistics to what the statistics actually does. So if the economy is growing, we are interested in what we call growth that is job enhancing. What we have experienced in recent times, I would say, is jobless growth. So the figures are increasing, but we still have high numbers of people who don't have decent jobs to do. And so, yes, on paper, the figures may look good, but I feel that our excitement should go beyond, mere statistics. Yes, it is true. If you look at the inflation figures, it is obvious that inflation figures have come down. But I still think that there is still more room for improvement. Inflation at 23.5% is something that is still on the high side. There is a nexus between inflation and unemployment. So any attempt by government to, keep inflation at the barest minimum has impact or effect on its ability to also create jobs. And that is why I think that the government needs to be more proactive. The figures are there to see, but the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the ordinary people saying? We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the debt restructuring and its attendant effect, as well as some extension of conditionality from the IMF, has been some negative gains to Ghanaians. So let's look beyond the statistics. What are Ghanaians saying on grounds? What were we promised and what are we experiencing? These are matters that I feel we need to take a critical look at.
For you, what is your take on that? He gave the metrics and suggested that we had made some good progress, at least in these regards.
We all want the progress of the nation, but the interesting question I'll ask is that often than not, IMF programs max real economic indicators. Why do I say this? Before an IMF program, where were we? Because the cedi was trailing behind the Sri Lankan rupee as probably the worst currency. Right. Up until we got an IMF program. So the question to ask is, domestically, what have we done significantly to improve our own gains? Is the IMF program? So it's quite now difficult to...
What do you think?
Well, it's obviously from an economic point of view and a research perspective, the IMF program is actually yielding some gains, right? Because there's a level of discipline. They've kept watchmen in quotes at the central bank and the ministries to actually look at what is done and prudent spending to be done. But to say that, inflation and interest rate, there's a correlation between inflation and interest rate. What's borrowing rate at the banks? When our businessmen go to get loans for their business interest rates, what's happening?
North of 32, 33%.
33%.
Right.
And that is draconian. So if that has no significant impact, then it even tends to question the credibility of the data that is being put out there. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but this is an inference to actually question the credibility of the kind of data we are reading from other presidents.
Are you casting doubt on what Mr. President
I am not casting, but what I'm saying is that there's a correlation between inflation and interest rates. And as of now, you, myself, know what interest rates are and what borrowing rates are. And if that is not having any impact or significant impact on that to any change, to actually water down and give some respite to business people, then there is room to question that data or raise questions in concerned minds that maybe there's something wrong with that data. But I haven't said that. I haven't been conclusive. Right? It is only an indication of what I'm saying based on what has been churned out and what the reality is on the ground.
So basically, from what you heard versus what you feel the reality is on the ground, you feel there's some sort of disparity.
There's a disparity in the data. Some sort of, yeah.
But how is that even possible in accounting? Because, look, in finance terms, in accounting terms, in economic terms, there are benchmarks to follow. You can't, for example, be in an IMF program and be like, you can't cook the books.
Oh, but that happens all the time.
No, but it's not legitimate practice, and you can't. Accounting, you can't. There are consequences for that.
Of course,
so if what I'm just drawing attention
but I am only
if what you are suggesting is that the books are being cooked,
it is something to look at. I've not suggested that that's what it is. But the question is, why is it not reflecting in interest rates? Are you not concerned? It's not. I think that's where your question should be going rather than the accounting principle of it. Even the big four accounting firms are paying fines every day. by not meeting the regulations. And they are the big four accounting firms. Do you not see that every day? So that rule is not cast in stone, and people still circumvent all of these regulations.
Speaking of this growth, the GDP growth, the projections, it puts us outside of the top 11 countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But yeah, Africa generally, because even Libya is in there. And it's shocking to know that Niger, is expected to grow over 11%, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Djibouti, and all of that, Tanzania. And our projection is 4%, but even that projection of 4% is not stable. Do you feel the IMF program, and per what Akufo-Addo has been telling us on inflation dipping, on real GDP growth targets and all of that, do you feel it is commensurable with what we are seeing on the GDP growth front?
Well, it depends. It will not ordinarily be, because we all have our own programs as a country, and then there's an IMF program. Definitely, as you know, the disciplinary nature of an IMF program would impede of some of our programs. But comparatively to some of these countries, there are happenings around. You take Niger, for instance. The lithium market has actually put Niger on the economic map very well. So if you want to make that comparison, that will not be really fit for purpose. So yes, growth is different within the region or the sub-region, and there are different economic local contexts and international contexts that's actually projecting some of these countries above us. What is happening? What gains have we made in the last couple? You talk about energy, even an investment in the energy sector. That's quite interesting to look at. What investments have been made so far in the energy sector? Moving an Amari plant from its normal state.
But we signed new contracts that haven't taken off.
Yeah, they haven't taken off.
No megawatts of power have been added.
Yes.
But deals have been signed. Just as some of the deals that were signed in the Mahama era fed off. No. Just let me land. It's not every deal that you sign that takes off within your period. I have had people engage me and make mention of the fact that, and indeed, some of these deals have been contracted. Even, you know that there are other power agreements that we have that haven't taken off. So we have 0 megawatts added, but something has been done in that regard, which is a projection into the future.
There's a vast difference between a deal and an investment, is there not? Or you disagree with me, right? A deal could fall through. An investment has happened, and we're expecting to see what is happening. So I wouldn't want to really go for so let's look at the difference between a deal and an investment. And it's an investment context that we are speaking to, right? We can sign 1 million deals. They could all fall through.
So like the PDS situation rolled over and executed.
So I want us to look at these within that context. I'm hopeful if things happen right. If we say there's what's happening now, it's that I feel that there is dumsor, and we're not being honest with that. Because you speak to people in the power sector, right? They are playing with a great supply system. So what happens is that when it's a peak period, it's difficult to have an even distribution of power. So what happens is that you have lights off at a particular time, and it comes back either after midnight or 11 or 10 p.m. when it's off peak, when people are back from work and asleep. So if there is a dumsor, why don't you program it and let people work within the program? Because people have business.
But the contention is that technically you cannot call it dumsor because it's not. They tell you, for example, if there's a shortage in the supply of gas, it's because funds did not reach these people, or there has been some constraint. It is not that the funds are not available. They tell you that with the IPPs, it's a rollover knock-on effect from the previous administration and everything. And that, for them, the definition of dumsor means it must be protracted. It must be long-term, like the 3 years we saw under the Akufo-Addo regime. And so that is what the qualification of dumsor really is. So I guess you would know that it's different strokes for different folks. It's not necessarily the same thing being looked at unless you are saying that no matter how little the time involved, once it goes off, it is
my understanding of dumsor is that once the lights goes off for a protracted period of time, considerably productive time of 6 hours, some people are having their lights out. How could that not be described as dumsor? Does not have economic ramification and impact.
Right.
Obviously, that is dumsor. Unless, of course, it's going 30 minutes, an hour, then we can probably talk about it from a different context. But then again, we can give whatever definition it is. He who feels it
knows it, right? Yeah. Okay. Let me bring in Dr. Adjei on this point. And today we put out a question. You might as well share your thoughts with us. Parts of Accra and other parts of the country have experienced power outages. through the night, overnight. If you suffered same, do let us go. I just want to go to the point, and sticking to you, Dr. Adjei, on the same point. President Akufo-Addo speaks about the energy sector. There's a quote I wanted to take because he talks about energy, and he makes mention of curing dumsor and ensuring that the lights stay on for 7 years. He attributes the cure to dumsor to his administration. There it is. He says, I am glad to say so far so good. We have managed to keep the lights on these last 7 years, even in the midst of a financial crisis. What is interesting, yesterday when I was helming that discussion, people were sending me live messages when the president said that, and said that even at that time, their lights were off. But from the energy end of our economy, what the president said versus the reality of not adding a megawatt to our electricity grid and all of that, do you feel we're on the right trajectory?
Well, thank you. I think that it is true that to a large extent, we are not in total blackout. We are not in dumsor as we know dumsor to be. So
what is your definition of dumsor?
Well, so if you look at what happened in the former regime.
No, I don't want you to. What is your definition of dumsor? For example, someone will say, you do me light, near SONA later. Someone is just sending me, our lights went off at 1 p.m. yesterday, turned on at 3 a.m. this morning. For that person, that is dumsor. So what is your definition of dumsor?
Okay, well, my definition of dumsor is how Ghanaians understand dumsor, because if lights go off, it is dumsor, fine. But I was going to make a point. Maybe if you had made me land, you could get my argument in perspective. So I was going to make the point that President Akufo-Addo's statement that there's no dumsor is because somebody made an investment, and the investment is yielding results as it stands now. So we experienced erratic power supply in the former regime. They made huge investment. This government is making gains from that investment. The fact of the matter is that as it stands now, there are some structural bottlenecks which all Ghanaians are experiencing. In the area where I live, almost 2 out of 3 days in the evening, lights will go off for some time. The issue is that they have not come out with a load shedding schedule. Formal announcement has not been made that there's a load shedding, but on grounds we are experiencing it. And I feel that for future, government needs to make more investment into the sector. My colleague in the studio was making a point that merely moving, a plant from one region to the other do not constitute an investment, which I sincerely side with him. I feel that there should be deliberate effort to, if it is a financing issue that needs to be addressed, if it is an issue of making more investment in the plant, that needs to be addressed, because every minute or every hour of lights going off has an impact on production, has an impact on livelihood. Imagine those in the hospitals who are supposed to go through, a surgical operation, or going through, a dialysis treatment, going through, a kind of treatment that demands the use of electricity. And lights are off, plants are nowhere to be found, lives are going to be lost. All right? So, yes, I concede, just as my colleague is saying, there is some element of erratic supply that is going on. What we do not know is whether this is nationwide. What we do not know is whether, in terms of the number of hours that these lights go off, it is prolonged enough. But whether it is short or long, there is something that needs to be done. And the president must be honest enough to have given some credit to the previous government for the investment that they made and the gains that they are, enjoying. There is what we call the dilemma of policy credibility. There is a time lag in every policy that is implemented. So one will sow the plant today, another will come and water, and then the increase will come. And I believe that whatever gains we are experiencing in the energy sector now is as a result of some seed that was planted in the past regime, And this government has come to water it, but there is more room for improvement.
Let me come back into the studio, Dr. Halid. One area that Mr. President seems to have totally shied away from, unemployment.
Yeah.
And everything in between, especially as topical as that issue has become in recent days, weeks, the recent releases, labor statistics by the Ghana Statistical Service, among others, pointing to, for example, those who have tertiary education, who in some quarter, I think between quarter 1 and quarter 3 of 2 years, back to back, 2022, 2023, who had not been in employment or had unemployment spells. Yeah. I feel, of course, we've not looked at the general figure of those, for example, who have tertiary education, who simply don't have work. Yeah. The dynamics are stark, but Mr. President sidestepped that issue altogether, especially on the back of the fact that it's just recently that we heard the Vice President, who is flag bearer of the MPP, talk about the fact that they had created between 2017 and I think 2022, 2.1 million jobs. Yeah. What do you make of it, first of all, Mr. President, not touching on the side, not broaching it, so to speak, and
I think in any economy, or any well-meaning economy, employment issues are a great issue, which is why even in the developed world, you look at Germany and the UK as of now, even with the kind of inflation they're having, it's not affecting jobs because there's job growth. So what's happening now is that...
Well, it is affecting jobs, but maybe not to the extent because even in the United States, it has had an impact. Joe Biden has been under fire at some point. Things have normalized.
Yeah, what I mean is that there are different kinds of inflation. So you could have that and still have jobs going on pretty well. So there would be some sort of... So what I was saying here within our own context is that the president is an admission of the failure of his own policies when it comes to employment, because he has touted a few policies. For example, NAPCO was one of them. So I was expecting that he would use NAPCO as one of his brainchild to say, okay, well, these are the yields of NAPCO. This is how much we've invested in NAPCO, and this is where we've been able to transit our NAPCO graduates to. But he was completely silent on that. Then again, you come to this whole issue of touting digitalization. What is digitalization without employment? You look at India, which has become a hub for IT. Not just IT, call centers are being shifted from Europe, America, and all over the world into India because of digitalization. So if we are touting low-hanging fruits of digitalization that is not commensurate of employment matters or reflective or embracing employment, what kind of a digitalization process are we engaged with? So these are the linkages of the sloganeering that we've had in the last couple of years and some of the policies that we've put in place. If 1D, 1F has been a success, it should produce employment because factories are going to be littered around the country and people are going to be employed within this. Right. If One Village, One Dam has been a success, jobs will be created within farming, irrigation schemes, and the likes of this. So if the president is unable to tie all of this within to tout an employment achievement and a success, then it's an admission of failure.
I think, and this has been touted, sometimes jobs are created yet, but it's about the sustainability of them. For example, if they are with the Nation Builders Corps, for how long are they going to be retained? And for how long are they going to be retained? And how are they going to be plugged into the system from there? Or is it that we have these schemes, they come on for 2 or 3 years, they have some means of sustenance. After the program runs off or tapers off, they are gone. Planting for Food and Jobs, for example, it's been said that hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created there. But the reality is, how many of those jobs are still in existence?
I'm not a labor expert, right? But from where I sit, I think my colleague will speak more to that. From where I sit, when you empower people for a short while, right, and take that empowerment off them by giving them short-term employment, they earn a living after a while, it's more dangerous than not giving them employment at all. So I don't even know the kind of situation. Well, the point is the person was earning a salary, working every day, dressed up to go to work. Now it's cut off completely, abruptly. What happens? It creates a certain level of danger. There's apprehension depending on how the person is wired humanly.
But someone else too would say that I had nothing at point A, at point B, I had something at least. At point C, I still had something. But at point D, I have nothing. At least there's a break.
At a point where that allowance can go into savings because you live in Accra, you've got accommodation issues, you've got rents and all of those, and transportation. So if you can't have a saving whatsoever off the stipends that you've been given, what does it become?
But some of these people are not just concentrated in Accra, some are concentrated.
No, but I'm just giving an example in the urban area. So I'm giving urban examples of the kind of danger it could create.
Right.
Right. And as I said, he's a labor expert. He might probably speak more to that.
Dr. Adjei, when it comes to unemployment, sidestepped by Mr. President, and oftentimes I also say that we talk about unemployment even without considering underemployment, which is also a crucial issue, where skill sets are not matched with what people well-trained in certain areas actually do. But how do you feel about Mr. President, just dancing around the issue, literally not even touching it at all, and the rhetoric we've got on unemployment?
Thank you for the opportunity one more time. I think that when the issue of unemployment or employment should be looked at from two angles. Number one, we need to look at the quality of employment and then the quantity of employment. In most of the cases, the argument or the focus has been on the quantity of employment. So you hear government officials saying, oh, we have created X number of jobs. This policy has generated X number of employment. But we tend to overlook the quality of the employment. Like you rightly mentioned, in the case of Ghana, one of the problems that we have is a high incidence of vulnerable employment. So even the few that are working do not have themselves placed in decent jobs. And by decent jobs, I'm talking about jobs that, have what we call social security, where there's a presence of a unionized labor, where formal contracts are signed, people are paid through the banking system and all that. Because of the high informality of, our economy, we see most people who are unable to find jobs within the mainstream formal sector resorting to vulnerable jobs because the argument is that they will say half a loaf is better than none. So I think that the argument should tend towards more to the quality of employment that we offer. Another point that I want to mention is the fact that unemployment is a security threat. You will notice that in recent times, there's a mass exodus of especially young people seeking for greener pastures. And that is because, the ILO has projected that in the few years to come, there's going to be what's called a youth bounce. In Ghana, for instance, we have a highly youthful population. So if you have a high percentage of your populace who are idle, who are unemployed, what is going to happen is that one day they are going to rise up and revolt against the system. And that is why I felt that the president should have dedicated ample time in addressing this matter. Let me, however, add that I saw something in the SONA where the president spoke about a policy by SNIT, what they call the seed policy. So the seed policy is a self-employed enrollment drive, where in an attempt to reduce the extent of vulnerability, SNIT is encouraging self-employed individuals to enroll on the SNIT system as a way of cushioning them. This, I feel, is a step in the right direction as a form of social protection, but more needs to be done. My colleague in the studio mentioned the fact that in previous reports of SONAs, the president has highlighted on NAPCO and other youth intervention programs. Our expectation was that some highlight of the success story these interventions would have been given. We can also say that, well, this is not the final report or verdict or account of stewardship by the president. So maybe at the end of his final stewardship, he may want to give us a success story. But given the fact that GSS has released a damning report that 2 out of 3 people are unemployed, we would have wished that government issues practical measures to mitigate the problem. So all in all, I think that the focus should not only be on how many people are employed, but we should be interested in what kind of jobs they are doing and where they are moving from within the labor market.
Gentlemen, we have about 4 minutes to go. I'm going to distribute that among you, 2 minutes apiece. Two questions. One, Ken Ofori-Atta as, and of course this is an extension. Ken Ofori-Atta as, special advisor, investment envoy, and all of that. I spoke to Kwame Pianim, and he made mention of the fact that, the same person who was in the midst of this, how is he going to advise on what? That was the point. But now it's been confirmed. What do you make of that? And secondly, this piece in the speech, I want to know how you understand it. There is no ambiguity about where the buck stops. When it comes to responsibility for what happens in the government, it stops with the president. He or she has ultimate responsibility. It would be an unwise president that would pretend to have all the answers and refuse the advice of his officials. But the fact remains that the president holds the executive power. Some have attributed this to Bawumia, the mates driver situation, and whether indeed the president has not listened to Bawumia. Two quick ones, 2 minutes and less.
I think I'll take the last one. So I think that was more of a political statement, if you infer from what he's trying to say.
Meaning what? What's your understanding?
To insulate his vice president, who is now become leader of his party. Obviously, that's what it is, to say that he did not have any responsibility. Anything that's gone wrong, put it on me because I'm walking away, I'm going home.
But in another breath, it would be an unwise president that would pretend to have all the answers and refuse the advice of his officials. He's saying he did accept the...
It tells you how confused the statement is, or how confusing he's trying to protect. So that's a struggle in trying to insulate. So what happens is that, but what he's failing in making this statement, he makes several inferences to constitutional issues. But there's something called, executive responsibility.
Right.
And executive responsibility is not individualized on the president. Right. What does the Constitution say about our executive? Our executive does not just only single out the president.
Right.
It's a team. So if he's unable to say that we are taking executive responsibility and he's singling himself out simply because he's walking home and want to insulate his vice president, then I think that's a bit disingenuous to have come from a president.
Okay. On the second point?
On the second point, very interesting, right? I mean, we were all not expecting this. For me, from a finance perspective and a governance perspective and an economic perspective and running an economy within an international space, I think that it's an elevation. So he's created a super ministry, right, at the presidency. You can check the letter that appoints him.
I have seen the letter.
You could see who is referenced or who is CC'd in that letter, right? Then it tells you the kind of power that has been given to him, which is above that of the minister or the current sitting minister. So for me, already the minister's powers has been usurped. And from where
Dr. Amin Adams' wings are being clipped,
and he's been put there as a caretaker minister rather than as a minister to do what he ought to do. In any case, what has put us here? It is the capital markets that has put us here. So if the very man who's pretended over the capital markets, where he has had a spree or a bond spree, that's left us here into a debt domestic exchange internationally and both domestic. You're elevating him to an advisory capacity. I think that is also a spite on the citizenry, because everyone, or even his own party, when 80 MPs came, right, asking that he should go home. Right, you rather had a reshuffle, you elevate him, and you put a caretaker minister at the finance.
But does it make economic sense? I'm looking, though, at the CCs.
The CCs, what are they?
Secretaries to the President, Nana Santi Bediatu.
Yes.
Secretaries to the Vice President, I believe that's Augustine Blake.
Yeah.
And the Chief Director, Jubilee House. That's
Jubilee
how
House,
you know.
right.
But I mean, what does that point to?
So what points is that there's a super ministry at the presidency that has not...
Does it make international economic sense? Does this apply to other jurisdictions? Are we doing anything wrong in doing?
No, we're not doing it. A president can appoint anyone as an advisor.
Right.
So it's not about what is being wrong. It's about the persona that's being put there and the arrangement that's being made.
All right, thank you.
That's the only problem.
Dr. Adjei, what is your take on these two matters?
Well, let me start with Ken Ofori-Atta's appointment. I think that it ties in with the second point about the president saying the buck stops on him. So, he has the mandate to appoint and fire, but this was least expected, given the fact that a lot of hue and cry was made from his own party people to sidestep the finance minister. Many were thinking that he was going to hang his boot, but here he resurfaces. We don't know the intent behind his appointment. We can only give the president the benefit of the doubt. But I feel that this is not encouraging enough for many Ghanaians who felt that the reshuffling was just a mere charade, putting one square peg in another round hole. I feel that For me, it was unwarranted, but the buck stops with the president. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and hope that it will yield a result.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Dr. Prince Adjei, you just heard him. He's a labor economist at the University of Ghana. We also had Dr. Sharif Mahmoud Khalid, Associate Professor in Accounting and Finance, join the conversation as well. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you for engaging us.
Right,
Stay with us. We still have a lot coming your way right here on the AM show. We'll be right back.